Welcome back to another episode of Pardon Our Promotion. How are you guys doing today?
Wonderful. Try to stay warm.
Yeah, it's cold out. Yeah. Today, let's talk about on-field hosts, like your show hosts.
Like this one back here?
Someone might be interested in this topic.
I know a little bit about it.
I was a host a little bit too. Were you a host?
I've done it,
yeah.
But like I would say I was a host.
I'm guessing the audience would say that too.
Yeah, right. You know me. So I want to talk about, and you're going to play a big part probably in this conversation. You have you have experience, obviously, Bob. But what is your host? Why are they your host? Why do we call them your host?
Well, we call them the host because they're driving your show. They're hosting your show. They're hosting your audience, your fans. I think sometimes people call them MCs, but there is a difference, right? Mm-hmm. The host is more personable. They get to know your audience a little bit more than just somebody who's talking in a microphone. They have that personality of more involved.
Right, like they're hosting us. They're
like I'd host you into my house,
right?
My living room. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that was always a big one. There's been a number of jobs that we've been on that's a point that you've driven home many times. They're not the MC. They're not the, they're your host, welcoming you to their home for a great house party night.
Mm-hmm. Come on in. Let's enjoy the night together.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How do we best use the host? What's the usage look like there?
For everything. I think your host, when I'm producing a show, whenever I am hosting, they're involved in every single thing that you're doing. With that live shot right there on the field, involved deep in all of the elements.
So how many voices do we hear? Who do we want to hear? So the host is obviously one of the voices. Mm-hmm. In the shows that you produced, how do you what other voices do you?
I like two hosts,
okay,
because at least two, you get that dynamic, you get a personality, you get they
rapport.
Get that kind of radio show feel almost. Sometimes you can get going back and forth. You can accomplish the same thing with a public address announcer and an on-field host, but I don't think it's as effective as really having two visual personalities in front of you.
I agree.
Yeah, I say it's kind of depends on the facility, but I agree that having those two personalities. In fact, I like to have three voices.
Yeah. I
like to have the PA person, yet kind of the voice of God coming down from the ether and talking and saying, here's the next batter, or whatever facing off is. So because it just kind of adds this level of, I don't know, not formality, but I don't know what, but it just adds a different level. And then that person still, the rapport from that person that you don't see to the person that you do see is very crucial, as you guys were talking about. But I also like to have that alternate, so that for the audience, they don't get bored. Right there, the fan they hear a different voice, they hear a different dynamic, as you were saying. In some shows that I produced, I had kind of a main host and multiple guest hosts, like 4 or 5 different people running a certain event and throughout the night. So there's a whole different voice and a different feel to that particular event. And one of the things, I'm going to keep going on. One of the things I use, most often the on-field host is somebody that may be a game day employee, or sometimes it's a full-time employee that is really good at the host and being in front of crowds. But the one thing that I think franchises and teams underutilize is some of the people that they have in their front office staff that might have a certain talent for one or two things. They cannot hold a whole show, but they'll be really funny for one particular event or a couple of them. And what's great about that is then that person gets well known. That woman or man that is maybe a group sales director or running sponsorship sales, now they're in front of 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people, and people get to know their face. Yeah. Now they're walking through the stands, and they might actually run into somebody that they could sell a sponsorship to, or a group to, or whatever. It's just an extra extension of that brand, right? Yep.
And you just develop then another character for your show.
Yeah.
You have a returning, a reoccurring character whenever this particular element that they're skilled at hosting comes
Right.
up, that's their game. That's their show.
Yeah. So I know I got on a little side topic of the mini hosts or whatever we want to call it.
We
But
we should do a whole podcast on characters and how to act them.
Oh, that's, yep.
I think
We'll put
could
that down.
talk
Yeah.
a lot about that.
So what else on hosting, on the main one? I'll take it back. I'm going to steer this back to the main host. And
Yeah. So like when you're looking, like we've all opened teams before. So when you're opening a team, you're hiring your host. What are we looking for? What are you looking for?
That big personality that isn't afraid to be in front of a crowd, obviously. Outgoing, personable.
irreverent.
Yeah.
A controlled ego.
Right.
They have to have a little bit of ego,
They
but
are talent, yeah.
Yeah, but it can't be something like it's my show, I'm the guy, I'm the gal, and it's all about me. That can't happen. It's all about the fans. And that's that era of gratitude and generosity, maybe, inside of that host's, mind or aura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm looking for, one of the most underrated qualities of a host is the ability to improv really well, because we can script the best script and have the best element that's happening before us. But, we rely on, at least I do, on my hosts to add just a little bit extra flavor to it. They add their own personal flavor. It also helps us if an element's falling apart, they can recover an element pretty well. But the ability to improv is huge, because otherwise they're just delivering bland, whatever's, written on paper.
And or they say the same thing at the
All
end
the
of
time.
every event. Oh, that was such a cool event. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can find another line,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, they have to have a little bit of humor to their personality, right? Because like you were talking about, sometimes elements just go wrong, and it's up to your host to figure out a way to make it either seem like it was supposed to go wrong, or to make your fans, your audience, engage in how wrong it went. So yeah, they really do. They drive the bus whenever it comes to those on-field.
What are some other underrated qualities of an on-field host?
I got one.
All right.
I'm keying off the word engage, the ability to engage and interact with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be an improv person, even all the other things, but the ability to make the audience really be part of the show and engaged. And I guess if I were to really boil it down, it's to love. If that host gives the audience love, they get it back in spades. So that's a certain talent to be able to pull everybody together as, again, they're in their living room, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's having a good time together.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I agree.
And this kind of goes along with that, but it's like when they're on stage, when they're down on the field, they're doing whatever element they're doing. They're in that character, but it doesn't stop until the last fan leaves your gates, because your host is nonstop hosting. So even after the element's done, they're going off the field, they're going up through the stands, whether they have to get to their next, destination, they still are engaging and doing all of those interactives with the fans, because they're still on stage, even if they're not doing a specific element.
If I'm if I'm in your house, I want you to pay attention to me
Right.
until I leave, in a way. I mean, it's not demanding, but it's kind of, imagine that house party and you have 30 people and there's 3 people left and you literally go to bed and there's like you leave 3 people in your living room.
I've done that.
I've
done that. I've done that.
Well, it's like if you give them dinner, you cook them dinner, and then as soon as dinner's done, you just disappear for the night. You can't do that. You have to, entertain them until they go to bed, and then do it again the next morning.
What else about a host? What else aren't we thinking of that, when it comes to utilization or just the overall, nature of their role? What is their main role? Obviously, they're the host and they're the on-field, but you never really think about what's their main objective throughout the show.
I think they become essentially the face and the voice of your team. Your fans, even if they're hearing the voice of God, the PA from the sky, they're not really putting a name, or they might be putting a name, but they're not putting a face. They become that driver that, they're out in public and people see them and they think of your team. So
brand ambassador.
They become a representative of your organization and of your club. So it's just so important.
So they have to be on when they're not even at the facility because they're recognizable,
Yeah.
right?
The host is kind of like a secondary mascot, it seems like.
Yeah.
So a little bit marketable too, even if you do it the right way.
Mm-hmm. But that's an interesting slippery slope. There was a client that I had years ago that the host became so big, a few different ones, that of course now they're demanding all kinds of extra money, and I'm the face of the brand. I mean, some of the hosts that were on like billboards, but then becomes the ego got caught. They got caught up in the ego. Now it's like, hey, this is my franchise. Well, not really. You still have to have that low ego and self-effacing, respectable demeanor out in the public, and not be all about me.
Yeah.
So, another thing that I like to see in hosts is that interpersonal relationship with the fans when they're not on the playing surface, not on the stage, shaking hands, walking through. So I've seen so many where they just sit in their own little spot,
Right.
ready to go onto the playing surface to do their thing. And they go right back to the little spot, and that's it. And literally the fans watch that person just kind of stand there, and maybe even on their phone. And they should be up, shaking hands, not just up in the aisles, but actually sitting down in the middle of an aisle. And, they've got 5-10 minutes before their next event. And
Right.
enjoy their fans. Again, same living room scenario, right?
Yeah.
Let's sit down with them, have fun.
Even when, the on-field entertainment is great, and when you're hosting, when you're on the mic, it's great. But the moments for people are made in between those innings. When you're going from one element to the next, those are the biggest moments that people remember. That's when they stop, say hi, grab a picture, whatever. And even if the host is down there looking at his phone, that's another thing. Because that problem was happening, I would get upset with hosts just looking at their phone during the game. I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, well, I got my, my rundown here, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's still a bad look. So what we need to do is either have someone with the host, a game day staff, an intern, just telling them where to go next, or they need to be able to just, have one little note card or something that they look at instead of their phone, because it's a bad look.
It is. It is. It's better to wire them up with
Or a wire.
and so they're getting direction from somewhere else on what the next element is.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one thing that most teams don't realize is the consistency that's necessary in your host, because how you were talking about, sometimes they are, game day employees, or I think a lot of teams put the host on the back burner whenever they're hiring for it. They don't really see the importance of it. And that becomes a problem, because then your fans don't get that personal connection with your host. Then they do become an MC. If they're, you have 10 different hosts that cycle in and out as your game day employees, but
your show value goes like this, right? And fans don't know what to expect, so the bar gets set lower and lower.
Right.
There's a motivational speaker named Zig Ziglar that used to say, not everybody in your organization is in sales, but everybody in your organization can lose a sale. And that's what you're bringing up. There's one of these things where the sales teams are so good in sports, because they've been selling tickets and sponsorship. Literally, sports teams. A buddy of mine said, "What do we do best? Do we put on baseball shows or whatever? No." We're a sales organization. That's what we do. Front offices are sales organizations that just happen to produce events,
Right.
to fulfill the obligations that they sold.
Yeah.
And that's where they drop off. And it's because there's no one-to-one correlation. Well, do we really have to spend the money on this host, or spend the time making sure our host is great from year to year? No, that's okay. It's just, we already sold it. We already got checks coming in. We'll just mail it in from here. And so that's the thing, because they don't see the fact that host maybe can't sell tickets, but sometimes if they're good enough, they do. It's because the value show goes up, and actually people have more fun, and there's more game day walk up and all that. But they don't see the fact that host can turn people off and not sell a future ticket. That makes sense?
Yeah. So in that line of thinking, how valuable in the staffing of your show is the host? Where do they rank on the list? How much, obviously, like you said, they have the ability to ruin your show for sure. But, when we're looking at staffing a show from top to bottom, how important is the host? Is it the most vital?
One of the most vital.
I think they really should make more money than the president of the team. Don't you? Especially
Well,
if
I
you're the host.
definitely think so.
But they are vital. Yeah.
No, they are. They are. They're one of your top employees, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of the mascot and the host are the most visible brand ambassadors that you have.
Sure.
Yeah.
The players turn over. They used to not turn over at the pro level, but now, and even at the college level, now with
transfer portal.
transfer portals, no team can guarantee that they're going to win next week or next year, or what player names are going to be on their jerseys.
Right.
And so, yeah, you have essentially those people, the mascot and the host, and a few others that are your brand ambassadors that people know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do a part 2 on this, right? We're going to have some guests, some actual hosts besides our Lindsey here.
Some good hosts.
Some better hosts.
Some active hosts.
Yeah, you're my husband, I guess. Definitely.
Well, cool, guys. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, drop us a note or a comment. We appreciate that. And if you have any suggestions for future shows, send those to us as well. Until next time, it's all about your fans. We'll see you later.
See you.